The HOA president hired contractors to cut off my lake cabin's water supply to force me out. What she didn't know was that my grandfather built the water system that supplies her entire 300-home development. When I flipped one switch in my basement, every toilet in her community stopped working. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. My name is Marcus, and I need to tell you about the most satisfying revenge I've ever experienced against an HOA that tried to destroy my family's lake cabin. By the end of this story, you'll understand why 300 homeowners had to go without water for 3 days because their HOA president thought she could mess with the wrong person. It all started with a beautiful lake cabin that my grandfather built in 1952. The cabin sits on Lake Paradise, a pristine mountain lake in northern Wisconsin. My grandfather was a plumber by trade, and when he built the cabin, the entire area was wilderness. There were no other homes for miles, just endless forest and crystal clear water. Over the decades, my family used the cabin as our summer retreat. We spent countless weekends there fishing, swimming, and enjoying the peace and quiet. My grandfather had built an amazing water system that drew directly from the lake and filtered it through a sophisticated system he designed himself. The cabin was completely self-sufficient. The problem started 5 years ago when a massive development called Lakeshore Estates was built on the land surrounding our cabin. The developers bought hundreds of acres and turned it into one of those luxury communities with expensive homes, manicured lawns, and strict rules about everything. When they built the development, they needed water and sewer services for all the new homes. The nearest municipal water line was 15 miles away, so the developers had to create their own system. Here's where things get interesting. They discovered that my grandfather's water intake system was the most efficient way to access the lake's water supply. Instead of building their own intake system, the developers made a deal with my father. They would pay him a monthly fee to tap into our water line, and they would maintain and upgrade the system to handle the increased capacity. My father agreed because the money was good, and he figured having better water infrastructure would benefit our cabin too. For the first few years, everything worked perfectly. The new homeowners got reliable water service, we got extra income, and our cabin had better water pressure than ever before. The development's water treatment plant was built on our property, but it was hidden in the woods and didn't interfere with our enjoyment of the cabin. The trouble began when Patricia Williams moved into the biggest house in Lakeshore Estates. She was a retired executive from Chicago, probably in her early 60s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the attitude of someone who had spent her career bossing people around. Within 6 months of moving in, she had gotten herself elected as HOA president. Patricia's first complaint was about our cabin. She claimed that our rustic building was an eyesore that violated the community's aesthetic standards. She said our dock was too close to the swimming area that the HOA had designated for residents. She complained that our boats were too loud and that we were using excessive amounts of water. I tried to explain to Patricia that our cabin had been here for 70 years, long before her development existed. We had grandfather rights to everything on our property, including our dock placement and our water usage. But Patricia wasn't interested in logic or history. "This is a luxury community now," she announced during one of her visits to our cabin. "Your little fishing shack doesn't belong here anymore. You need to upgrade your property to match community standards or consider selling to someone who will." That really bothered me. Our cabin wasn't a little fishing shack. It was a beautiful log structure that my grandfather had built with his own hands. It had been maintained and improved by 3 generations of our family. But to Patricia Williams, it was just an obstacle to her vision of a perfect luxury community. Over the next several months, Patricia escalated her harassment. She started showing up at our cabin with HOA board members, taking pictures and making notes about alleged violations. She complained to the county about our septic system, even though it had been recently inspected and approved. She tried to get our dock removed, claiming it violated new navigation rules that the HOA had created. The breaking point came when Patricia decided that our water usage was affecting the entire community's supply. She claimed that our cabin was using too much water and that we needed to install meters and pay usage fees just like the other residents. "Your grandfather's old agreement doesn't cover current usage levels," she announced during a heated HOA meeting that I had been invited to attend. "You're essentially stealing water from the community, and that needs to stop immediately." I pointed out that our family had owned the water rights to this lake long before the development existed, and that the HOA residents were actually using our water system, not the other way around. But Patricia had convinced the other board members that I was the problem. That's when Patricia made the biggest mistake of her life. She hired a contractor to install a valve system that would cut off our cabin's water supply. Her plan was to force us to negotiate by making our cabin uninhabitable during the summer season. On a Tuesday morning in July, I arrived at the cabin to find contractors working on our water line. They had dug up the pipe that connected our cabin to the main system and were installing some kind of shut-off valve. "What are you doing?" I asked the contractor. "HOA ordered us to install a water control system," he replied. "They want to be able to regulate water flow to your property." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Patricia was actually trying to cut off our water supply to force us out of our own cabin. I immediately called the contractor's supervisor and told him to stop work, but he said he was following direct orders from the HOA and had permits for the work. That's when I realized that Patricia had no idea what she was actually messing with. She thought she was just cutting off water to one small cabin. What she didn't understand was that our water system was the master control for the entire development's water supply. When my grandfather built the original water system, he had designed it with multiple backup systems and manual overrides. As the original owner of the water rights, our cabin system was the primary control point for everything. The treatment plant on our property could be operated independently, but the main water distribution system ran through controls that were actually located in our cabin's basement. My grandfather had been smart enough to maintain control over the system even when he agreed to share it with the development. He had installed manual shutoff valves that could cut off water to the entire development while keeping our cabin fully supplied. He never told the developers about these controls because he wanted to make sure our family would always have water access, no matter what happened with the agreement. I had learned about these controls from my father, who had learned about them from my grandfather. We had never used them because there had never been a reason to. But Patricia Williams had just given me the perfect reason. On Thursday morning, while Patricia's contractors were finishing their installation of the valve system designed to cut off our water, I went down to our cabin's basement and turned off the main water supply to Lakeshore Estates. Within 2 hours, every home in the development was without water. The HOA's emergency phone line was flooded with calls from angry residents who couldn't shower, wash dishes, or even flush their toilets. The community's irrigation system shut down, leaving expensive lawns and gardens without water during the hottest week of the summer. Patricia was in complete panic mode. She called every plumber and water company in the area, but nobody could figure out why the system had failed. The treatment plant was working perfectly, but no water was reaching any of the homes. The contractor she had hired to install our shutoff valve insisted that his work couldn't have caused a system-wide failure. By Friday afternoon, Patricia was desperate. She showed up at our cabin with 3 other board members, demanding to know if we had anything to do with the water outage. "Marcus," she said, trying to sound reasonable, "we're having a community emergency. The entire water system has failed, and we need to work together to solve this problem." I looked at Patricia with a straight face. "That sounds terrible," I said. "Lucky for us, our cabin has its own independent water supply, so we're not affected." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, independent supply?" "Well," I explained, "when you installed that valve system to cut off our water, we had to activate our backup system. My grandfather was smart enough to design multiple water sources for our cabin." The truth was slowly dawning on Patricia. "Are you saying that your backup system is somehow connected to our community water supply?" "Oh no," I replied innocently. "I'm saying that your community water supply is connected to our backup system." Patricia's face went completely white as she realized what I was telling her. The entire Lakeshore Estates development was dependent on water infrastructure that my family controlled. She had tried to cut off our water, not realizing that we could cut off everyone else's water in response. "You can't do this," Patricia stammered. 300 families are without water. This is an emergency." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "It is an emergency. And it's an emergency that you created when you decided to install unauthorized equipment on our water line." The other board members were starting to understand the situation, and they were not happy with Patricia. One of them, a reasonable guy named Dave, asked if there was a way to resolve the situation quickly. "It's pretty simple," I told them. "Remove the valve system you installed on our line, restore our full water access, and formally acknowledge our water rights in writing. Do that, and I'll be happy to restore water service to the community." Patricia tried to argue, but the other board members were facing angry phone calls from hundreds of residents who wanted their water back. Dave took charge of the situation and agreed to my terms immediately. "Patricia," he said firmly, "call your contractors right now and have them remove that valve system. This situation is completely unacceptable." By Saturday afternoon, the contractors had removed all the equipment they had installed on our water line. The HOA board had signed a formal agreement acknowledging our water rights and promising never to interfere with our cabin's water supply again. Only then did I go back to our basement and turn the main water supply back on. The relief in the community was immediate. Residents were finally able to shower, do laundry, and water their expensive landscaping. But the damage to Patricia's reputation was already done. Word had spread quickly through the development about how the HOA president had caused a 3-day water outage by trying to mess with the wrong neighbor. The backlash against Patricia was swift and severe. Residents were furious that her personal vendetta against our cabin had left them without water during the hottest week of summer. Several people had been forced to stay in hotels because their homes were uninhabitable without water service. An emergency HOA meeting was called for the following week, and Patricia was removed as president by a unanimous vote. The board also voted to censure her for reckless decision-making that endangered community welfare. Several residents threatened to sue her personally for the costs and inconvenience caused by the water outage. But Patricia's problems were just beginning. The water outage had caused significant damage throughout the community. Expensive landscaping had died without irrigation. Several residents had to replace appliances that were damaged when the water pressure suddenly dropped to zero. One family's hot water heater had been ruined when it overheated without water flow. The HOA's insurance company investigated the incident and determined that Patricia's unauthorized installation of water control equipment had voided the community's coverage for water-related damages. This meant that Patricia could be held personally liable for hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. Faced with potential bankruptcy, Patricia put her house up for sale and moved away from the area within 3 months. The new HOA leadership reached out to apologize for her behavior and to establish a better relationship with our family. The incident actually ended up benefiting our cabin in several unexpected ways. The new HOA board agreed to upgrade our dock and boat launch area as part of a good faith gesture. They also agreed to maintain the access road to our cabin, which had previously been our responsibility. Most importantly, the legal agreement we negotiated gave our family permanent protection against future HOA interference. Our water rights, property rights, and historical usage patterns were all formally recognized and documented. Any future HOA board would have to respect these agreements or face the same consequences Patricia had experienced. The story of the Great Lakeshore Estates water outage became legendary in the area. Local plumbers still talk about the day an entire luxury development lost water because their HOA president tried to mess with a cabin owner who controlled their water supply. As for our cabin, it's still there on Lake Paradise, looking exactly the same as it did when my grandfather built it 70 years ago. We still have unlimited water access, we still enjoy our peaceful summer weekends, and we now have a signed agreement guaranteeing that no HOA will ever try to change that. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's reminding bullies that they're not as powerful as they think they are. Patricia Williams learned that lesson the hard way, along with 300 very thirsty neighbors.